Hey, g'day guys. Look, last night was our first pre-season race in the Coa Sports League, and it gave everyone a great chance to get a feel for some of the racing that we have on Zwift and in the league. Perhaps a chance for people to get a better understanding of potentially where they might fit in the league itself. And we had a lot of questions last night come through. Naturally, this is a learning process, right? So the whole reason why we did this was to, certainly as a coaching service, is to teach you not only how to use the technology, but what it all sort of means, and then how that can then, of course, translate to the road. So I'm going to walk you through some aspects of potentially what happened last night to help you better understand why you finished in a certain position, perhaps how you can get better, and then finally, what the points tally would look like if we would have been racing for points. So the first thing we want to talk about is the categories. So we have A grade, B grade, C grade, and D grade. I am going to refer to my notes from time to time because I don't know the exact watts per kilo off the top of my head. So last night we had an interesting situation where we only had one rider, which was Tebow. Tebow was the only rider that nominated for A grade. So Tebow could have just rolled around and still collected 100 points because essentially, in terms of points wise, he wasn't racing anyone. So a lot of people opted for a more conservative approach and just, I'm not sure whether I'm A grade or B, So so Tebow, he stumped up and he would walk away with essentially 100 points for just turning up. Now, Tebow had a really solid race. He's a very solid cyclist, averaging 4.4 watts per kilo. And certainly you would say that Tebow belongs in A grade for sure. Now, we also have B grade, which is 3.2 watts per kilo to 3.99 watts per kilo. So watts per kilo, just to go back and explain what that sort of means. So it's your power to weight ratio, essentially. So just to run some numbers to give you an idea. So if you average 200 watts for a ride and you weigh 70 kilos, right? So you take your average watts, which is 200, divide that by 70, and then you get your watts per kilo. So in that case, it's 2.85 watts per kilo. Say, for example, you average 280 watts for a ride and you weigh 87 kilos. You do 280 divided by 87 and you get 3.2 watts per kilo. So just let that sink in a little bit. A lot of this stuff may go over your head and you'll have to go back and watch it again, but that does dictate a lot of your speed in the game in terms of how that works. So it's not just a pure power contest. I think a few people were confused and thought, well, why? I was pushing, so many more watts, but I finished 3 positions back. So the weight that you put in, which is obviously something that we are big on in terms of integrity, dictates how fast it is that you're going to go. And even this as well, we had some riders who had a higher watts per kilo but finished behind someone with a lower watts per kilo. How the hell does that happen? Well, I'm going to go through that, and that's all to do with strategy and drafting and just conserving and trying not to get isolated. We definitely had a rider that got isolated in a grade last night and probably got punished a little in the end, but that's part of the learning. That's why we have pre-season races too, so you can learn. So what we're going to do is we'll jump to B grade. That was what was in the broadcast last night. So going forward, A, B, C, and D, you're all going to start in the same, they call it a paddock in Zwift. So all in that start pen, starting next week, you're all going to be starting in the same pen. But obviously not so much racing each other, but racing people in your own grade. But if you're smart and say you're in C grade, you might want to get on the wheel of a B grade rider and get that 20-25% draft effect and get tugged along. So anyway, we'll touch on that too. So look, let's go to a bit of the action. And I'm going to walk you through what it sort of looks like in terms of a start. So just bear with me 1 second. So we're here at, this is the start of the race, guys. So this is what you guys were seeing on Facebook Live. So you'll notice before I click play that there already is a separation in the group. So this is B grade again. So I'm going to hit play and let it roll.
Get it off, mate.
So we're off here and we are out of the barriers. Obviously, we just started following Tony Goodyear. It is off.
I'm going to turn the sound off and talk to. So Steve, our two front riders here, they got off to an absolute flyer, Steve and Aaron Webb. So they had a lot of momentum to the start line. And you'll see that already there's a bit of a break. And I would say my first bit of advice to say a guy like Tony is that probably to push or carry a bit more momentum to that start line earlier to make sure you get on that group. Now, Zwift does offer, so I'm going to pause it here. You do get a draft effect on Zwift, right? So just like when you're riding on the road, you get that, you can essentially basically, so if you're out riding on your own, right, and you're doing say 30 kilometers an hour and you're pushing, let's just say you're pushing 200 watts. I guarantee that if you're sitting in a group doing 30 kilometers an hour, you're only going to be pushing 150 watts, for example, or something like that. So the idea, of course, here is in the strategy that if you get that draft effect, you can essentially do the same speed at lower wattage. You can do the same speed and have a lower watts per kilo and probably save a little bit more for the tank for that finish line. So there is a strategy, not a gaming aspect. This is just as real life cycling. You're going to get that draft effect. So we'll go back. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the first com. I'm just going to fly through that bit. Just bear with me.
Look, it'll be really hard to make ground onto the group if you can't stick here. So we should see potentially some strategic riding here, and just trying to stay together. A bit like in any cycling race, you know, people will try and make sure they hold a wheel as they go up.
Yep. So we've got Webby off the...
So you notice in I said about holding a wheel, so you really got to try and fight to see, so you could see a separation in the group. So using my cursor here, you can see that Karim lost a little bit of ground. He managed to fight it back and work his way back for a short period of time. But once that elastic band kind of snaps on Zwift, or even, you remember watching Tour de France races, when they break that band and they lose the wheel, this is the beauty of how realistic this is, it's very hard to get back on. So you can see that here, that this front group now formed in the race, Aaron Webb, Aaron Stagg and Jason Avery. And what do you know, these three, even after 1.4 kilometers, these were the top three in the B grade race. So we'll leave that there and jump through to, I think, a really cool finish. Let's keep this running through here. We'll go to the
lead. I reckon Stagg is just sitting back. I think I'm going to... Oh, there it is. There's the power up from Jason Avery that we're looking for.
He's used the draft bus.
So here's my tip. He's gone too early. I'm going to throw it out there as the commentator. He's gone off too early.
You're a brave man.
I probably should have done Greg a favour there and left that bit out.
Both used theirs already, so they're going to have to bridge the gap themselves.
What a thrilling finish this is. It looks like Jason's he could hold them off here. Both the Aarons are going to be working together through the line. Jason is absolutely dropping the hammer. He's got a really good lead, 2 seconds. I don't think they're going to close it.
They're not going to close it.
I think Jason's going to take
They're still working,
B-grade.
so Aaron Webb now 5.2 watts a kilo. I don't know exactly how far there is to go. There can't be long.
Jason Avery coming up to the finish line. We're with him now as he crosses the finish line. He's absolutely dropped over 6 watts per kilo. Well done, Jason.
So we'll leave that there. So that was the finish of B grade, and Aaron and both the Aarons there collected second and third. Okay, so we're back with me now. So let's go through what the points looked like in B grade so you can get a bit of a feel for that. So across the line, we had Jason Avery in first. So he collected 70 points. Okay, we had Aaron Webb in second position, who collected 65 points. Aaron Stagg finished in third. He collected 60 points. Karim Bari in fourth position collected 55 points. And Tony Goodyear finished in 5th position, collecting 50 points. So we draw a line under 5th, and anyone who finished outside 5th in B grade, unfortunately, would have missed out in points. That's just part of the racing and the strategy of picking the right grade. So you may very well have finished 6th in B grade. If you had chosen A grade and been perhaps a little bit cunning, you could have come 2nd in A grade just by turning up and collected 95 points, which is 25 more points than the winner of B grade. So this is where the fun of the strategy of choosing the right category at times can come in. Now, one thing that would happen, so what we want to do is try and promote people into the right categories so they don't just race and collect points in lower categories all the time. So if you do finish a podium place in a category twice in a season, you are automatically promoted to the category above, right? And you cannot move down from that point for the rest of the season. So for example, if we're mid-season and Jason won B grade again next week, he would be promoted to A grade, and he would remain in A grade for the rest of the season. Same as if he nominated C grade, C grade next week. It's a collective thing. So if you podium, you're promoted up from the league to the league above for your best result. So that works. So don't worry about people just sitting down and collecting points. We want to force people up into their proper categories, albeit all riders yesterday were within the watts per kilo allowed for each category, so that's fine. But again, we're trying to push you guys up to get better. Down in C grade, that race was not broadcast, but to give you an idea of how that played out, so we had Jason Stewart. He collected first place, albeit by 1 second. So he collected 50 points. So for the first place getter of C grade, collected the same points as 5th in B grade. So we've tried to balance it as best we can, and then the points go down from there. You can jump to your Zwift companion app and open the event on there, and that will also go through the various results. So looking at the B grade results, I think there's a couple of really interesting points that we can look at here. So particularly from a watts per kilo point of view. So let's just compare second place, which was Aaron Webb. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to my computer screen again so you can see this. So you can see here, Aaron Webb finished in 2nd position, right? And he was only 3 seconds off the leader, and he did 4 watts per kilo and averaged 323 watts. Yet you look at Tony down here, he actually had a higher watts per kilo output, albeit lower wattage, but a higher watts per kilo, and finished 30 seconds off the pace. So the first thing would be, Tony was unable to stick with that front group going up the climb. And also, I feel like both the Aarons got the jump on the pack out of the gate. So that first 10 seconds almost dictated a little bit of this race as well. So if you think about it, so how can someone have a higher watts per kilo in terms of power? So Aaron won't mind, we can work out what Aaron weighs just by looking at this, by the way. So we just go 323 divided by 4, which gives us roughly 80 kilos. So Aaron weighs 80 kilos. And then we can look at Tony Goodyear, for example. He's pushed 293 watts and 4.1 watts per kilo. So we just do that same calculation, and we know Tony weighs 71 kilos. So Tony's 9 kilos lighter than Aaron. So of course he's going to have a higher watts per kilo and enable him almost on the road to almost, he doesn't need to push as much power to go as fast. So the reason why essentially Tony did finish down is it's more I suppose a tactical, and just being able to try and stick it out there at the start and stay with the front group as best you can and not become isolated. I remember seeing Tony during the broadcast, and he was basically alone for quite a period of time and unable to get any sort of a draft effect. And you had that front group of Jason, Aaron and Aaron working together to increase that gap essentially as a group of 3. So isolation is a bad thing. And I suppose controversially, that's, in Ironman or any cycling racing where it's a Grand Fondo. If you're isolated, chances are you're going to be caught by that group. How many times do you watch the Tour de France? We'll come back to me. How many times do you watch the Tour de France and you see that guy, the breakaway pack, always get caught by the peloton? It's simply because the guys in the peloton aren't having to do as much work until the final stages to close that gap. So if you've got a breakaway of 2 riders and you have 150 cyclists working together, and the guys in the cars, in the team cars, doing all the calculations in terms of why do you think they always catch them over 180 Ks in the last 200 meters? It's pretty simple science. Well, it's not simple, but certainly they've got the system worked out. And occasionally the breakaway stays away, maybe because the peloton doesn't chase, but sometimes simply they get it wrong. And that's the nature of racing. So hopefully that's clarified a little bit about how the watts per kilo and how the racing works. We've got another chance next week to refine that a little bit more in terms of the categories that you select. I'd encourage perhaps a few more people to have a go at A grade, so Thibaut's not all there by himself. And just looking at the race's raw data, there's no doubt that some of the front guys in B grade would have pushed Thibaut, albeit Thibaut was on his own, so who knows what his upper limits were. So that just about sums it up. I hope that gives you a good clarification as to what sort of happened last night. And look, we had a ball doing it. And again, you'll get better at it. You'll get a better feel for it. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Cheers.